Hey everybody, and welcome back to the ZMAM show. We know that October is finally completed here, but we couldn't help but just want to hit a little bit more on horror movies in general. And we thought we'd talk vampire movies and everything from actiony, horror style, all the way to just the original Dracula films. And pretty much, what is your favorite Dracula movie? Adam, how's it going tonight?
Pretty good. This will be an interesting topic. I'm expecting a lot of different opinions, so feel free to comment along the way, viewers.
Absolutely. So Adam went back and actually he said, "Hey, I got a couple movies here that I can watch," and he mentioned 30 Days of Night and John Carpenter's Vampires, which I love those two films, and I think they're definitely more of the action type vampire films in general because it doesn't exactly stray away from the concept of Dracula very much, but it gets more into that like we're hunting them, or in other words, in 30 Days of Night, the vampires are hunting humans in a town. So, Adam, as you're watching these movies, what did you find yourself kind of catering to more when it came to 30 Days and also John Carpenter's Vampires?
Definitely, I think vampires historically are kind of like shadows in the dark and subtlety. And I think while that subtlety was present in both of those movies, it was not a key component. The word action, like you mentioned, it was big. Like more
Yeah.
so, I thought in 30 Days of Night because it's always nighttime. So these creatures are always out running around, and I mean they're trying to be a little bit sneaky, but honestly, the vampires in 30 Days of Night are almost rabid. So
Agreed.
I think the thing that I thought about both of these movies that stood out to me is I was like, wow, these vampires are really in your
They
face.
they totally were. And 30 Days of Night is one of those kind of thrilling, it's like a thriller, excitement type film. Because what worse situation can you think of to have an enemy that hunts at night and you are in a place where it is totally night and very much you are not safe no matter where you go. And once they send their kind of lackey guy in there to kind of take care of things, get rid of the sled dogs. I didn't quite understand how he was able to gather all the cell phones, but hey, let's go with it. It's a small thing to down on a movie that was so well put together. And like you said, these feral zombies that like they have their own language, and which we cannot even understand whatsoever. Luckily, there's a few subtitles I think in there, and they are ruthless, just completely ruthless.
Yeah, and honestly, the thing that actually surprised me was, I mean, whereas I think there was a little bit of subtlety in John Carpenter's vampires, I would argue that these vampires weren't very subtle at all. As a matter of fact, like the concept of going to a city that is dark for 30 days is brilliant, but it sounds like the vampires didn't even come up with it. They sent the human lackey up
Yeah.
there or he found it on his own and told them. These vampires almost kind of reminded me of animals hunting in a pack.
Right.
I mean, they were very, and and while the vampires themselves I thought weren't as imposing, I thought that the situation that they were placed in, combined with how frightening it was for the villagers, still made for a very interesting story.
Absolutely. And I will mention that I just happen to be reading a little bit of trivia on this. So, when this was first written, and I don't know the name of the gentleman, but when he was writing it, he brought it to several production companies trying to see if they would bite on and to make it into a movie, but nobody was taking onto it. And it wasn't until it was finally accepted as like a three-part comic series that someone,
Hmm.
obviously they're finally like, "Yep, we like where you're going with it." I guess it needed a little bit more oomph and a push before. And once they got it though, they were ready, and obviously they moved forward with it. I thought Josh Hartnett. I like him in certain flicks for sure. I think he did a pretty good job playing the main character, Evan. We have his kind of separated, not divorced, but active in some ways, Stella, who's a great supporting character and supporting him throughout the film. And as you can see, their relationship kind of building in this crisis, as a lot of relationships usually do, and as they're working together to fight off these badass vampires. But different when you kind of look at John Carpenter's vampires, when you have Jack Crow played by old crazy James Woods, and but what we have a bunch of vampire.
Well, Hades
Yeah,
himself,
right.
right?
Yeah, and he's got his vampire slayer crew, right? And I love that intro. And you gotta love like that intro music, like boom, 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 boom. It just
It's good
kind of
time.
gives you like kind of westerny feel slash. Like these guys are just they're rugged and they're just going in. And I loved how they had their huge freaking vehicle full of vampire slaying weapons. They all had their different style. I mean, you had everything from the Asian guy and he's got his two MP5s going. You got like the Indian style guy and he's got his huge spear with the tactical light on it. You got Jack Crow, James Woods with his crossbow, and you got Montoya, and they got their plans. They know how to go in to these nests, and they have all their lingo and specialties, and they go in and they snag these shitheads, and then they reel them out, with that the pulley system, right?
Right, and I think that's an excellent way of putting it. And one of the things that I tend to like in my horror heroes and heroines is, competence. These guys, for the most part, knew what they were doing. They had a plan, they had rules that they followed, and they knew what they were hunting down. And another thing to kind of mention about it is, like we're in 30 Days of Night, I felt like it was the vampires that were the main kind of like in your face action that were forcing the survivors in the town to react. In this case, while the vampires weren't as subtle as they might be in films like Dracula, I actually thought it was the vampire hunters in John Carpenter's vampires that are like, okay, we're going to go in, we're going to get them. They were like, no nonsense, don't waste any time. And so they were the ones that actually brought the action, which I mean, I don't know if it's rare in vampire movies, but it was interesting.
You usually don't see the hunters having such an edge over their enemy.
Right.
But as much as of an edge as we thought they had, and even though things did get a little crazy in that first scene when they go into that first nest, and even though they were prepared, you could see it was still chaotic. I mean, because you just never knew how these things were going to come out and how they were going to attack. And how many of them. Right. I guess then that was their fear. But they were usually able to handle it, but they had never come across a master so powerful. And when this master finally makes itself present and freaking attacks them on their own ground while they're pretty much on their Sunday, which wasn't their Sunday, they're just partying up, but they're drinking, they're drunk, they're high, they're getting drugs, whatever. Got a bunch of hooker ladies in the part, and he just unleashes hell. And I think that was one of my most favorite parts of the entire movie.
No, I agree that part was really well done. And I mean, they had just kind of raided his nest, and he had happened to be sleeping out. He tended to sleep in the ground for whatever reason, right. I guess instead of in a coffin in his nest.
That was creepy.
So they raided his nest, killed all the vampires that were kind of under him. I think this was just kind of his form of revenge. So, right. I mean, from an action perspective, I think it was a well-shot scene. And I think the character motivation made a lot of sense, too. So I'm going to second John. I think that was also one of the better scenes in the movie.
But another really important scene I want to mention, too, because there's a lot of things going on in the movie, and we're going to talk some other, so I don't get too much, but I thought it was super cool when, at that one point when Valak, which is the main master vampire, and he's coming out of the ground, and there's some other ones rising with him, and I think those were other vampire masters as well. They just weren't probably as strong as Valak himself, the main head vampire, as we learn through some of the history in Padre. And you got to love also some of the commentary, although hella raunchy. But James Woods, so Jack Crow does not take any shit from anybody, including the priest, and it's funny to see it all go down. I'll just put it that way.
A little unhinged at times, honestly,
Extreme.
But got the job done.
He
sure.
did. So when you take films like these huge action ones, and I happen to mention to Adam another one that I really, really enjoyed, and we'll just talk it briefly because I know Adam hasn't seen it yet, but it's Dracula Untold, and that was in 2014, and I think it's one of the more recent films that's been done with the Dracula premise, but you may enjoy that one if you want a little bit of history and lore about Dracula, which, Adam, you found, you were doing some research on it too. His name is actually Vlad, right?
Right, and it sounds like the original novel, the 1897 Dracula novel that kind of spawned the modern vampire, was the Dracula in that was loosely based off of Vlad the Impaler, who is a historical Romanian king. So it sounds like maybe this movie, from hearing you talk about it, decided to take that and really kind of dig into the origin story of where Dracula came from.
Yes, they did. And if you want to see some just cool vampire powers in general, he basically allows himself to be bitten, and so he can protect his people. I won't spoil anything else, but it is pretty crazy. And there's a few twists in there in between, and at the end there's even another kind of a twist that is kind of pretty cool because I think that 2014 film was supposed to spark, as I was mentioning to you, Adam, a whole nother set of monster movies, kind of like for Universal, because that was around the time when they were getting ready to redo The Mummy, if you remember, with Tom Cruise.
Oh yeah, I do
When they
remember
did the
that.
female version, which I'm always more partial to the original, well, not, excuse me, not the original, but the fun Mummy movies that had Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz in it. Those are
Yeah,
always some fun ones. At least the couple of the earlier ones were. But
yeah, I like
yeah,
them.
but when we get to the vampires, there's so many films, and again, Dracula Untold. I think there's a mixture between that history, also some solid action, and I wouldn't say so much on the horror aspect. We have another favorite, as we've already talked before, Adam, our Lost Boys,
Right.
which you had the chance to finally watch that this year, right?
I think the thing I liked about that one, and you can watch our review for more information, is just that every character had very clear motivations that were relatable, amongst other things. But I think that was the big thing that stuck out to me.
And soundtrack.
And the vampires almost felt human. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for, but I thought it worked.
It did work. It did work. And I know some people aren't into kind of like noir type vampires or whatever, but I thought, like you said, they did a wonderful
Right.
job with it. But then let's go back in history a little bit. So we talked a lot of more recent ones. So Adam, you had a chance to go back and watch an old one here just tonight, didn't you?
Yeah, Horror of Dracula, 1958. So not the original 1931 Dracula or even the Nosferatu film that was supposedly a knockoff of the Dracula novel that came out in 1922. But yeah, stars Christopher Lee as Dracula, and it was interesting to watch the movie. I think horror watchers from this day and age would go back and watch it, and it wouldn't stun them. A lot of the horror in that movie is implied.
Right.
Like there's a lot of it's almost like reading a book where you have to use your imagination
Right.
to think about what's happening off screen. And I think I've decided that I like some of the newer action horror vampire styles are really cool and really fun to watch, but I also really appreciate the subtlety that was originally baked into the vampire mythology. And I think that even though it maybe wasn't as scary, I think that the 1958 version did capture some of that, the horror of Dracula film.
That's a very good point. With a lot of movies, especially more now than ever, you feel like they have to show. Like it's all these graphic, type. Which, mind you, I don't mind so much because let's face it, reality when it comes down to it, I mean, it is extremely graphic. When a vampire's biting your neck, like those 30 Days of Night vampires, they're not doing it the old subtle, kind of almost kind of romantical way, as he charms the woman and he just breaks her over and then he lays into it. No, these things are feral beasts just getting after it. And when you compare that to something which I showed you just a couple small tiny clips from a movie, not exactly the strongest, but it was Dracula 2000, actually made in the year 2000, and it was starring Gerard Butler amongst a bunch of other names. But it was interesting because he could quickly put into a trance and woo any female pretty much that he desired, and then he would just bite them, and then obviously, and that stuck true to like kind of the original story where Dracula usually always had the three brides, and the three brides help him do his bidding and this and that. So I thought that was interesting. And you know what, actually I was mentioning that another technically vampire movie would be Van Helsing. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
And because who was
Yeah.
that? Was that Hugh Jackman, Adam?
Hugh Jackman played Van Helsing. I think Kate Beckinsale may have been in it as well, if I'm not mistaken.
You absolutely have it right. And although that one is action, yes. Cheesy as hell, yes. Over the top, yes. But I'll tell you what, though. Funny enough, it's still very entertaining. I guess it's because you had a lot of different elements in there. You had the werewolf element where you have Kate Beckinsale's family that's been fighting off these vampires for years and years and years, and like I said, the werewolves kind of play a small factor in it. How the vampires are using them as their bidding. Anyways, it's very interesting, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think the thing that I would add to that is there's a lot going on, and I think probably the people who didn't like it
Too much.
probably thought it was maybe a little too much, maybe not fleshed out as much as it could have been. But as far as like, it's not going to be too slow. And if what you're looking for is that fast kind of nonstop action, I mean, you're going to get it.
You're right. When it came to pacing, if anything, it's kind of I'm sorry, I just had a thought. I just had a picture of like the director and they're like literally just shooting cocaine as they're okay, on this next scene, we gotta this dude's gonna fall off here, and then we're gonna show a carriage, and they're gonna be flying, then this chick's gonna fly in. It's like,
Yeah, I mean that's probably about what happened.
slow down, wait, let's go back to the first guy. What's happening to him? So as we're going through the vampire movies now, I just actually just one just popped into my head, Adam. Let's talk about Underworld and those series of movies. How many of those did you get to see, or did you get to see any of them with Kate Beckinsale?
I think I only saw the first one.
Okay.
I think what I appreciated about the Underworld was the kind of the embracing of the mythos, and what I thought that they kind of did well is like it still kind of had that in your face kind of more gory style of combat that you're used to in really I think 80s movies and later. But like it still kind of embraced the mythology of like the kind of unseen vampire. So I liked that part of it.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, it's been long enough since I've seen it that there's not a lot else that I remember about
Fair
it.
enough.
So you have to lead the way.
So just to help you a little bit on that one, so I really liked Kate Beckinsale's character, Celine. And what's cool is Celine is kind of narrating throughout these movies, and not a ton, but she's kind of giving you some backstory about how there's been this raging war between the vampires and lichens, which are the werewolves, for hundreds of years. And you try to understand some of these key characters, and they put you right into it. I mean, it doesn't take you long before you're understanding who the key players are, and they just don't fully reveal to you why are they so angry at each other. And just like everything, there's always politics involved with Victor, which is one of the leading ruler vampires, along with Marcus. Marcus is one of the other ones, and then there was a female. So those are like one of the leading vampires, and they always do it so that one is awake and the rest of them get to sleep, and I guess and regenerate their powers and keep their strength up and whatever. And it's just interesting because Victor, I found out as you watch more of the movies, he was not even an original vampire. Marcus was one of the original ones that was bitten. But Victor, he was bitten by Marcus at one point because it was similar to like kind of that Vlad the Impaler deal where he needed to protect his people. Well, Victor, basically, I think his kingdoms were under attack and this and that, and he needed the power to defend against these enemies. And so Marcus gave him the power. And of course, then he made some of his knights vampires, and then that's went from there. And anyways, if you get a chance to go through the movies, there's some pretty compelling stories and some great visual effects. I mean, you gotta love Sony. And is it Cinegems? I can't remember, or Cinemagens? I forget how they say it. But anyways, they did a wonderful job just in general, keeping us tantalized with all these just awesome visuals and shots, cinematography, and even some science built in there too, as they find out different ways of killing each other with actual silver, coated bullets. And then the other ones have UV light. I mean, yeah, a little far-fetched. Sure, of course it is, but still kind of cool in general.
No, I agree with that, and I think actually that's probably a good point. Is that the thing that it really did well was focusing on really kind of capturing the lore and exploring things that could work well. It took some very interesting turns on how you could take out some of the different some of the different creatures in the movie, and I think I would almost argue that they weren't actually horror movies. They were almost more like it was almost more like a war saga against two types of creatures that were predominantly horror creatures. And I think that's like what you said. That's why they focus so much on the weapons and the science and stuff like that, because it's really the style of movie.
You're right. They were action films. I mean, yes, vampire films technically, but because there's vampires in it, but there was more to it, and action was definitely the premise. Now, let's talk about, and I'm gonna let you take over because you just watched one of these recently. Let's talk about Fright Night and the couple versions they did of that one.
Yeah, so they had 1985 and 2011 version. Actually saw the 2011 version first. Watched the 1985 one recently. Actually really liked that one because it takes place in kind of a modern day setting, so you got that believable kind of thing to it, like this could happen. And effectively, what happens is this guy who's late high school, basically trying to make out with his girlfriend, likes watching this horror film, this horror TV series, and a vampire actually ends up moving in next door to him, and he ends up kind of figuring it out and has to figure out what to do about it. And it's I think the things that I appreciate about it is that I felt like it was relatable because you could see that happening to you as like, if you're fit that demographic
Yeah.
anyway. And also because the vampire that moved in next door was charming, attractive, seductive, but also very dangerous. So captured a lot of the traits that, a lot of kind of the traits that classically made vampires very imposing were present both in Chris Sarandon's 1985
Uh-huh.
Vampire and Colin Farrell's 2011 Vampire. They both did a very good job of capturing
Very
that.
neat.
So,
Yes. But I did not get a chance to see the 1985 one. In fact, I forgot about it in general. So I am going to back up and take a little page out of my 80s history and definitely watch it because it has a 7.1 out there and several reviews on IMDb. So it's definitely not bad. And no doubt, it has aged in time. Now, will it completely hold up? I mean, you said you liked it. So, and we've watched a lot of ones kind of in tandem. So I have a good feeling that I'm going to enjoy this one. So I'm glad you had a chance to find that one and bring it back up. And I don't know if we exactly asked the audience earlier on, but what is your favorite vampire movie? And why? I'd be curious to know why those are your favorites. I mean, are you more of a traditionalist and you like the slower moving, slow pace, kind of like the Bram Stoker's Dracula, which we didn't fully mention, but we'll go ahead and talk about it right here since we are doing it. And or do you like more of the newer aged ones with the young teen punk zombies? Is do I even dare to say? Please tell me no. But is Twilight your favorite series? There may be a few females out there. You love your Twilight. Hey, I'm not gonna hate. I didn't participate. I did not. I did not see the movies. If you can convince me, go ahead, put it in the comment. If you want to, if you can convince me that it's worth watching, I will take it upon myself to go and watch at least the first one and see. But I'll tell you, it's one of those, Adam, that I've never had even a partial inkling to basically go and watch.
no, and it's honestly, Mike, we weren't the target audience, and it's going to be even tougher sell for me. I mean, I will never judge anyone for liking anything. People are always welcome to like things that I don't
True
like.
that.
I mean, that's part of diversity. But like, good luck convincing me to like
I mean,
Twilight. If you like it anyway, so be it. No problem. But
we're
whew,
definitely equal,
tough sell for
we're
me.
equal opportunity here on the ZMAM show. We enjoy all positions of films, and just because we like something doesn't mean everybody's going to like it. That's for sure. And I'm a lot more easier on some films just because I love horror and thriller so much. It's very easy to get me on board and say, "Hey, check this film out." But like you said, it could be a tough one for that Twilight. But Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I don't think you had a chance to see, is that correct, Adam?
Haven't no. I watched some highlights, but no, I haven't seen
Sure,
it.
but Bram Stoker's Dracula very long. There is definitely a story there, and I think that's a really big part of that one. It's one of those traditional storytellings of Dracula, instead of varying from the theorem, if you will, when it comes to some of these more actiony type ones. And you have Keanu Reeves in there as a real young man. You have Gary Oldman, tremendous, great actor, actually playing as Dracula himself. And they really try to, I want to say, kind of humanize Dracula at some point. Like there's towards the end of the film, and it's not spoiling a whole lot, but you just really get this feeling like he's just trying to find someone to love, because I think Winona Ryder is the one that he actually is trying to get, and he's got her kind of
Olmina
right. Yes,
Harker. I mean,
exactly. And thank you for the name drop because I totally forgot her name. And
sure.
he's trying to get her to fall in love with him, which of course he's using some of his powers. But I almost so much think he doesn't even want to have to use his powers. He wants somebody to try and spend eternity with because he's so sick and tired of just being alone. And by the end of the film, I actually kind of felt bad for Dracula in some ways, which is very odd. Usually you're just kind of like, nah, kill that son of a, because he's usually killing all of our friends or the characters the protagonists that we've come to love throughout the movie, right?
Yeah, well, and that would be a very 90s style of storytelling, kind of like try to look at things from all angles and at least outside of your traditional action movies, which had clear good and bad guys. But
Right.
but yeah, it makes sense to me that that's how it would be, and that's interesting because that I think I haven't read the original Dracula, but I know a lot of the earlier works, including the 1958 film I watched that were based on
Sure.
it. I don't know that they did try to portray back Dracula with that same kind of humanity. Like in the
No.
1958 version, they actually they actually made him sound more horrible by talking about how vampirism like
Right.
affected the different victims and how it took them long to become vampires, and where they were actually like literally addicted to getting their blood drank, but also consciously not wanting it. So
Okay.
it's interesting to see them take that
Hmm.
change from it being just a very painful and addicting yet undesirable process for the victims to all of a sudden Dracula is this character that maybe you can kind of relate to on some level.
Absolutely. And I think, traditionally, he is a villain. I mean, he's not your buddy. And unless you want to turn into one, which there have been movies that have done that as well. In fact, I didn't even know you knew this, Adam. 30 Days of Night actually had a sequel.
Huh.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say it was it was definitely worth a watch. It was not amazing, but it was
Okay.
worth a watch. Um, Same takes, same things going on, but Stella, which they had to get a different actress because the original actress was not willing to come back for the sequel. Basically, she is trying to spread the word that vampires are real. No one's believing her. She comes across a crew of vampire slayers, just people like you and I, but they've been affected by these vampire clans, killing their loved ones, and they're trying to hunt them, and they want Stella's help to try and get one of the head vampires, which I think her name is Lilith in the 30 Days of Night, Dark Days. It was interesting. Again, not something you'd have to write home about or run out to go see quickly, but if you're just looking for a movie to watch, that was also pretty good too. I
Gotcha.
did think of another one just because you were kind of talking there as well. It just kind of popped in my head as you were talking about the style and, Dracula style is Interview with a Vampire, which had Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise.
It's been a long time, but I have seen that
Sure,
one. And I saw it as a kid, so I think there were a lot of subtleties baked into that movie that I didn't really understand.
absolutely.
And no, I think it may have been well received when it came out. I know people were talking
Yeah,
about it.
well, yeah, the two heartthrobs in there, so that didn't hurt anything. But I think, like you, I saw it when I was a lot younger and didn't really fully appreciate it. And then I finally had a good chance to see another huge chunk of it in later years. And I was like, yeah, I could see why people like this movie. It was pretty solid. And again, it was that storytelling, showing them as they were going through the ages. And it kind of showed that because Tom Cruise, I believe, he's one of the vampires. He's doing his thing, and he turns people sometimes along the way. And there's something about Brad Pitt's character that fascinated him, that he wanted to turn him, and they start living their life together and as friends, as much as I can tell. I don't think it was anything more than that. I don't think they were lovers, but even Brad Pitt over time just starts to get just sick of, because he's ruining lives. He's taking loved ones
Yeah.
from people, and Tom Cruise just doesn't get it, and there's a falling out there. Anyways, it was a very compelling and interesting film, for sure. So another one to add to the list. And gosh, we've already talked almost maybe a dozen films here just right now with vampires. It's amazing all the different takes throughout the years, and I think it's been a fairly successful deal as they've gone through the years making these films.
Yeah, and I'm gonna throw one more in there. There's a movie. It's a mockumentary called What We Do in the Shadows. None of the people in the movie are big names, but it's like an alleged documentary, and it follows like these three or four vampires as they walk around and just live their life. And I think a lot of traditional vampire movie watchers are going to be turned off from it because I don't know that that style of humor is directed at them, but it's definitely different. I thought it was funny, but
There's a guy, sorry, one of our viewers, Arflet. I'm just going to call you out because I appreciate you, Arflet, always coming out. He always brings some really good knowledge and some other history in his comments, so I appreciate you coming out and commenting. But he did mention that to me, and I have not seen it, but I will take some time and get around to seeing it in November when I we didn't get a chance to do it by this review, so unfortunately I can't say one way if I like it or not, but maybe later on, if we're just in one of our other reviews, maybe I can bring it up just to say if we enjoyed it or not. But like you said, it's different though, right? It's taking that different aspect and following these three, is it men? I think it is.
yeah, and I mean, like it is just off the wall. I think the style of humor is just like how ridiculous it is, the things that they find normal, like the things that they do in their life that are normal to them just look completely off the wall to everyone
That's kind
else.
of cool.
But because it's normal to them, they're just like, yeah, this is just Wednesday. That's kind of their approach to it.
I
So there's
like
all
it.
this weird stuff happening,
Yep.
and then they go back to kind of the documentary and you're like, and then they're talking about it like it's a real world or something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I like it.
So
It's different, and then I don't mind
yeah,
different. We get tired of seeing the same old reprints and the renditions of all the different movies. Especially the older great ones that we all come to love over the years, and now they come and they're like, "Hey, we're going to redo that one," and you're like, "Why?" Yeah. But
right.
we do have to remember too, at times, as I just talked this briefly, that there is a younger crowd of people that they're newer generations, and they have to find their way in cinema. And it's not that they should be subjected to and forced to watch all the older 70s and 80s and even 90s flicks at this point that we all have come to love so much over the years. I mean, they kind of need their place when it comes to cinema too. What do you think about that, Adam?
Well, I think I definitely agree with you. I think it's inevitable that as new generations come along, they're going to write their own story. And when they do that, they're going to borrow from the generations that came before
Yeah.
it. I think you can appreciate what's yours and appreciate what you've created.
Yeah.
And if you have the time, still go back and dive into where it came from. I think you can watch the new stuff, the stuff that came out in your timeline, your life, really appreciate it, and then go back and say, oh, this came from
Yeah.
here, and this came from here. I think there's value in both.
And I fair to say a lot of those ones, if they were to go back and see where the originals came from, I think they would be surprisingly shocked if they found themselves like, wow, this older version's probably actually better. And maybe not so much better, so much that it was filmed better, which some yes, maybe some no, but the stories were just so original and felt great, and which is funny, even a lot of 70s and 80s films aren't even originals. They were taken from earlier ones, like John Carpenter's The Thing. That was taken from an even older version, which I have yet to watch, but I'm going to put it on my list just so I can have that background. But even though I love the 1982 version, John Carpenter's The Thing, it even stems from an older one, The Thing from Another Planet. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting when you look back at film history and how that all plays in. But obviously, we went on a little tangent there. If you did enjoy this, then let us know. What is your favorite vampire movie and why? And if we missed any movies in here and you're like, how could you forget Enter Name?
I guarantee you we've missed a ton. It's a widely used genre where there's so many we can't cover them all. So yeah, I agree with you, Mike. If we missed your favorite one, go ahead and yell at us, tell it what it was and why we should have watched it, and yeah, we'll read the comments and see what it looks like.
Yeah, maybe there's even a good chance that we did watch it. As you can see, we go pretty non-scripted here on the ZMAM show, so we talk about a little bit of the information we're going to talk about, but we don't write them down on a list and check it back and forth and make sure we hit every single one, because there's no need. I mean, there's so much cinema out there, but these are some of the ones that I think are near and dearest and truest to our style of watching films. And so that's what we try to bring to you, just perfectly raw. So we want to thank you guys for coming out and watching this little short talk on vampires in general. I know Halloween is over. Trust me, I'm hurting. I'm hurting here just as much as everybody else. Or maybe you're happy. Maybe you guys are already watching Christmas movies. I curse all of you, mind you, but it's okay. If you're enjoying that, good for you. We will talk some other fun stuff. Hell, it's been a while, Adam, since we did a Christmas edition years ago when we were starting the ZMAM show. So maybe we'll talk some Christmas movies. And yeah, I can't promise there'll be Hallmark ones, but maybe a little bit more mainstream might be fun and in order. So. But with that said, we've had fun here tonight. To make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy what you're watching here. Come out here and check my Walking Dead reviews. I'm doing Fear and World Beyond. I know, World Beyond, right? But I am doing those reviews as well. So make sure to come out if you want to get a quick recap. And Adam and I will be back every Wednesday with new material, so you guys can join in and have some fun. So with that said, I am Mike. This is Adam, and we will catch you guys at the next review.
See you on Wednesday.